You know, I was this close to not doing this review, but then I thought about it and realized, oh, if I do this review, then I'll have an excuse to dress like a pimp. So, here we are. Hey everyone, I'm Ben, your underground conductor, and welcome to Underground Cinema. Hope you can't hear the squeaking. Anyway, this is the second video in my Black History Month series. And I figure, while February is still chugging along, for now, that I would go back and cover a very niche genre in Hollywood history. So this week, we'll be taking a look at the action comedy from 1975, Dolemite. Now, Dolemite, as a film, is actually quite interesting because in a lot of ways, it feels sort of like the quintessential, Blaxploitation B-movie. For those of you who are not familiar, back in the early 70s, there was a wild trend of exploitation films coming out that covered a variety of different topics, from sex to cars. But probably the most notable subgenre to come out of this era of exploitation would be the Blaxploitation film. Blaxploitation films were typically crime dramas or action films shot on a very low budget that typically took place primarily in the black community or covered the black community extensively in terms of conflict or racial issues that the black community was dealing with at the time. Looking back at this era, probably the most notable blaxploitation films to come out of it would be movies like Shaft or Superfly. However, there were also several other notable films that came out of this era, such as Black Caesar, Blackula 1 and 2, and Blackenstein. This is a real movie. This exists. I'm not joking. Came out, I think, in 1974. It's real. Look it up. Side note, there's also an amazing blaxploitation drama that came out in 1972 called The Final Comedown, and the movie stars Billy Dee Williams, who played Lando Calrissian in Star Wars. I actually have the film here in this blaxploitation 15-pack of films, which they call urban action cinema. Don't want to alienate buyers, I guess. Absolutely great movie, and if you've ever wanted to see a sex scene with Lando Calrissian, there you go. That all being said, unfortunately we're not talking about The Final Comedown today. Today, we are talking about Dolemite. And Dolemite, as a film, I feel is probably best remembered for being one of the direct inspirations of Black Dynamite. Black Dynamite being an amazing blaxploitation parody film that came out in 2009. Now, I should stress that Dolemite is only one of the inspirations for Black Dynamite. Michael J. White, who both created and portrayed the character of Black Dynamite, has been very open about his influences regarding the character, definitively saying that he initially got the idea for the character while he was listening to a James Brown song, and more explicitly saying that while he was constructing the character, that he drew heavy influence specifically from Jim Kelly, Jim Brown, and Fred Williamson. That all being said, while watching Dolemite, there's so many elements of the film that you can see bleed over directly into what would become Black Dynamite, whether it be elements of the plot, characters, or even the overall aesthetic of the film. But what exactly is Dolemite about? Well, I'll try to keep this quick because the plot of Dolemite is actually very loose and very simple. When the film opens up, we meet the character Dolemite, played by Rudy Ray Moore, as he is laying in a prison cell. Dolemite gets released from his cell, and then he gets taken to see the warden. When he gets to the warden, he sees that one of his associates, a woman named Queen Bee, is actually sitting there to the side. And what do I mean when I say associate? What I mean is that Queen Bee is the headmistress of his whorehouse. As we find out throughout the film, Dolemite is actually a pimp. And before he went to jail, he basically acted as the crime lord for his local community, which is referred to as the Fourth Ward. And the warden informs him that his community, the Fourth Ward, is in disarray. That since he was arrested 2 years ago, that crime in the Fourth Ward actually has not decreased, it's increased. And a consequence of the crime going up is that Dolemite's nephew, little Jimmy, has actually been shot and killed on the street, despite the fact that he wasn't bothering anyone. The warden then tells Dolemite that he will release Dolemite from prison on the condition that he sort of cleans up the Fourth Ward and investigates what's going on here. As the film goes on, we sort of discover the unraveling conspiracy that's been going on in the Fourth Ward. One of Dolemite's rivals, a guy named Willie Green, ended up taking over the Fourth Ward after Dolemite went to prison, and Willie Green, using this power and influence that he's attained, has stolen Dolemite's club, increased drug trafficking and prostitution in the Fourth Ward, and has also engaged in, I think, some gun trading. It's kind of vague. But as we come to learn more about Willie Green, we also come to understand that he is not working alone. As it turns out, Willie Green has actually been working with the mayor of LA. And it's implied in this film that the mayor is the one who set up the frame job on Dolemite. That way, Willie Green could get put in charge of the Fourth Ward, and the mayor could then, by proxy, control the crime in the Fourth Ward. As it turns out, actually very easy to frame someone. All you have to do is hide some stolen fur coats and some cocaine in their trunk. Nice, simple, easy. Also, side note, Willie Green in this film is played by D'Urville Martin, who's a very famous Blaxploitation actor, appearing in films like Black Caesar as the Reverend Rufus. And in addition to that, D'Urville Martin actually directed this movie. He directed Dolemite, which, interesting. Anywho, as all these unraveling discoveries are happening, Dolemite ends up taking his club back from Willie Green. The two characters then have a final confrontation at this club during the comeback party that Dolemite set up for himself. Dolemite ends up punching Willie Green's guts out. Not joking, he does that. But Dolemite himself is injured during the process, so he has to go to a hospital. Now, this confrontation feels like the end of the film. It feels like the natural conclusion to the narrative. You know, Dolemite, the hero, defeats the bad guy Willie Green, he takes back the Fourth Ward, everything's good, and he gets away alive. But there is a secondary antagonist in this film, being the mayor. And over the course of the film, we've gotten to know this FBI agent who's been circling around doing this investigation around the Fourth Ward, but also the police and police corruption. And this FBI agent not only takes the heat for Dolemite for killing Willie Green, but the FBI agent also goes to confront the mayor. As the FBI agent is closing in on the mayor, we see that the mayor has just murdered a girl that he was sleeping with. And this girl was maybe one of Dolemite's girls. I couldn't keep track. In any case, though, the mayor then runs away with all the dirty money that he's accumulated, and the FBI agent starts chasing him in a pretty decent car chase. The mayor then stops at an airstrip to get in a plane so he can escape, but before he can get on, the FBI agent shoots and kills him. So both villains are dead, movie's over, right? No, wrong. Before the mayor died, the mayor also took a hit out on Dolemite and said, oh yeah, Dolemite's at the hospital, get him while he's weak. So, there's a couple people coming around to fulfill that contract. Dolemite, despite being injured, is able to defend himself against the attackers, but then some police who were harassing him earlier in the movie come to fulfill the contract themselves. And side note, one of the cops that goes to kill Dolemite looks a lot like Matt Stone, who is the co-creator of South Park. Just something odd that I noticed. Anyway, before the police are able to collect on Dolemite's bounty, the FBI agent shows up and says, no. I'm FBI and you two are going to jail for corruption. We then get a very abrupt cut to the final scene of the film, which I will talk about in great detail momentarily, where we see Dolemite and the FBI agent standing together. There's a sense of camaraderie between them, but the FBI agent is also apologizing to Dolemite because they had to shut down Dolemite's club. He asks what Dolemite's going to do next, and Dolemite says it's all fine, and cue credits as we hear Rudy Ray Moore doing slam poetry describing what Dolemite's going to do next. Maybe. But yeah, that's what happens in the movie Dolemite. Now, many of you who keep up with my videos might have noticed that during my plot synopsis, I didn't cover a lot of detail about what happens in the film. Typically, I prefer going really deep in my plot synopsis, breaking down individual scenes, talking about character moments or plot details or, storytelling techniques that I find interesting. The reason I didn't do that here, though, is because most of this movie is just dicking around for 90 minutes, both figuratively and sometimes literally. and there's really not too much substance to dissect. Like, this movie is meant to be a stupid action sex comedy with a very loose plot that ties things together. Like, that's very intentionally what it's meant to be. And to be fair, it mostly succeeds at what it sets out to do, but it's also not very substantive. And part of the reason I had a hard time figuring out whether I want to do this review is because I didn't really get the film. Like, this is the first review I've done where I've had to watch the movie 3 times. 3 times to try to analyze it and dissect it. Like, I was legitimately having a hard time latching on to elements of the story and trying to figure out what everything was about. However, before my 3rd viewing of the film, I did do something that offered me some much needed context on the film, being that I watched the Rudy Ray Moore biopic. Some of you may remember this being advertised back in 2019, but there was a biopic about Rudy Ray Moore released called Dolemite Is My Name, with Eddie Murphy playing Rudy Ray Moore. The film itself covers Rudy Ray Moore's life as both a failed comedian and musician, leading up to the creation of his character Dolemite. And while I think it's a good film, obviously, Dolemite Is My Name is a biopic, and biopics are notorious for taking the true stories that they adapt and taking a lot of creative liberties with them. So, after I watched the film, I looked up Rudy Ray Moore's life to see how much of the film was accurate, and a decent amount was. And learning about all this information, learning about Rudy Ray Moore's life, it not only helped me to appreciate Dolemite a bit more, but it also helped me develop a deeper appreciation for Rudy Ray Moore as a human being, as well as the influence that he had on entertainment. Like, Rudy Ray Moore, like many people, moved to LA because he wanted to get famous, but he was struggling to break in. People didn't really like what he had to sell, but then he created the character of Dolemite during his stand-up routines, and it really just hit it off with people. He then started making comedy albums of his comedic routines as the character Dolemite, just doing slam poetry, which is absolutely hilarious. And the growing popularity that he got as this character that he created, Dolemite, eventually led him to make the Dolemite movie with a bunch of his friends. And seeing the influence that Dolemite had not only on the black community, but on cinema at large, it's kind of inspiring. It broke box offices that year on a $100,000 budget. It made like over $12 million, which is astonishing. Rudy Ray Moore and his friends were able to make 6 more films, and believe it or not, Rudy Ray Moore's style of slam poetry actually had a significant effect on what would become the hip-hop genre of music. That's why, in some circles, Rudy Ray Moore is often referred to as the godfather of rap. It's all really interesting, and like I said, it did help me appreciate Dolemite more. But this movie's it's not good. It's not good. It's not a good movie. Like, there's a lot of elements of the film that I do genuinely appreciate. For example, a lot of the songs that you hear in this movie are original compositions from Rudy Ray Moore and Company, which I think is genuinely impressive, and that also utilizes the skill set that Rudy Ray Moore had, because he did come to LA to do music. So I think it's absolutely spectacular that instead of licensing songs, which is, terribly expensive, he and his friends made their own songs for the movie, which I think is innovative. And the songs are also really good. Like, I'd recommend listening to them if you have the chance. Like, genuinely, I think they're great songs. And another thing I found impressive with the film is that, there are a couple extended sequences with Dolemite doing his famous slam poetry. And the first couple times I watched this movie, I felt like those scenes were gratuitous. That, you're going to stop the film for 4 minutes, literally 4 minutes, to just, do slam poetry to people to make them laugh. And I didn't really personally find the scenes funny, but, after watching the biopic and then going back to watch Dolemite for a 3rd time, while I still didn't find the scenes funny, I actually did grow a deep appreciation for the fact that, he's basically just, making up rhymes off the top of his head and weaving them into a narrative. Like, he's telling a story with rhymes. Just rolling out of his head. That's impressive. That's legitimately impressive. And, it also feels like a precursor to rap battling, which, once again, goes along with the title, Rudy Ray Moore, Godfather of Rap. I also heard and I did not verify this at all, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but I heard that Rudy Ray Moore actually learned basic kung fu and karate to do the fight scenes in this movie, which is dedication. I think that's impressive. And the choreography isn't terrible. Like, there's better kung fu movies, obviously, but it's not terrible in this movie. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that a big plot point of this film is that all of Dolemite's prostitutes, after he went to jail, went to karate school to learn karate, which, yeah, there's a girl kung fu army in the movie, so, yeah, that's something you want. Go for it. And I also like the fact that there is an attempt made to make the world of this story feel lived in. Like, we start the film when Dolemite's already in jail. Like, he's not riding high and then gets put away and then gets let out. We start the narrative with him already in jail, and there's been world-altering events that have occurred since he's been in jail, like Willie Green taking over the streets. Like, I really admire the effort that's made to make this world feel more fleshed out than it is. But as for everything else in the movie, like, I'll be frank, if I wasn't such a big fan of Black Dynamite, I probably wouldn't enjoy Dolemite as much as I do. Like I said, there's a lot of elements in Dolemite that carry over into Black Dynamite. Like the plot point of Dolemite's nephew being killed, that's very similar to Black Dynamite's brother being killed in that film, and how that sort of kicks off the plot for Black Dynamite's character. There's also the character of Queen Bee, who is very clearly the influence of the Black Dynamite character Honeybee, and while Dolemite himself bears very little resemblance to Black Dynamite outside of being a kung fu pimp, he's very similar to Black Dynamite's best friend Bullhorn, who rhymes constantly in the style of Rudy Ray Moore. There's also the character of the hamburger pimp who appears in Dolemite. Like, he's like a drug addict who loves burgers but can't pay for them. And the character is very clearly, like, in the same vein as, like, Wimpy from Popeye. But looking at that character, it really feels like that character inspired the character of Basehead from the Black Dynamite animated series. Can't prove that, just very similar vibe. So yeah, there's a lot of similar elements between these films. Even the posters are similar. But it's important to keep in mind that Black Dynamite is meant to be like a parody, and there had to be something that the movie was making fun of, and what Black Dynamite was making fun of was a lot of the amateurish decisions that were made in this movie. Like, the film Dolemite has pretty poor acting, and to be fair, this was a first-time experience for almost everyone on set. I think the only experienced actors in this movie were Derville Martin, who also directed the film, and Jerry Jones, who wrote the film, funny enough, and I'll come back to him in a bit. And, like I mentioned, there's a bunch of abrupt cuts in this movie. This movie is not edited well, and there's also a bunch of continuity errors shot to shot. And like I said, first-time production, I can give a pass to a lot, but something that's really jarring is when they jump to scene and there's like no establishing shot indicating the change of scene. It is very abrupt. And you see this from the beginning of the film, when Dolemite is talking to the warden, and they flash back to when Dolemite was arrested. There's no, like, fade effect, or, like, call to, like, the flashback. It just happens. And it's so weird and stands out even more when you consider that there's another flashback, like a minute or two later, showing Dolemite's nephew get killed, and there's like a little wavy fade effect to that. So it just makes me wonder what happened here. Like, it's funny. Like, you can enjoy it ironically, but, you know, it's just very jarring editing choices. Another problem I had with the film is that it's kind of clumsy with its commentary. Like, the main villain of the film, the mayor, he's meant to be a stand-in for Nixon, and they even overtly reference Nixon in this film, like, a couple times. And it makes sense, the Watergate scandal had only happened, like, 3 or 4 years earlier, but it's not, like, subtle at all. And seeing that made me realize, oh, this is why Nixon is the main villain in the Black Dynamite movie. It's because of this. And while we're on the subject of lack of subtlety, going back to what I was talking about with the world building, like I said, I admire the fact that they make an attempt to make the world feel lived in, but when it comes to how they convey Dolemite's reputation, it doesn't feel organic. Like, there's a way that you can write a character that has a reputation that supersedes them. Like, I think the Escape movies from John Carpenter, Escape from New York and Escape from LA, do a stupendous job establishing the reputation of Snake Plissken's character, for instance. But when it comes to Dolemite's reputation, the film insists upon the audience that Dolemite is some sort of badass, and it does not come off that way at all. Like, there's so many scenes in this movie of Dolemite, like, beating up cops, doing kung fu, like shooting guys. And like those scenes are cool, and I think they're actually quite well done for what they are, you know, despite the fact that there's no actual contact in a lot of them. But Dolemite himself never feels like he's like a force to be reckoned with. He never feels like you should respect him. Like, I don't want to be mean about this, especially, you know, understanding Rudy Ray Moore's story, but it feels like throughout the film that Dolemite's kind of a goober. It feels like he's like a lame guy pretending to be cool. And to be fair, I think it's pretty cool the fact that he changes outfits in almost every scene. I think the dude has style, to be sure, and I really like that. But he never feels cool. He kind of feels like a poser. And I know that's a riot coming from someone like me, but... And to be fair, maybe this is an issue that's alleviated in the other Dolemite films. Like I said, him and his friends made like 6 more after this. But I'm just saying, in this film, it doesn't feel like he's the badass that they're making him out to be. And you know what? Maybe it's just because there's that one scene where you see him like half naked and he's wearing tighty-whities. You know, that just screams loser to me, personally. I don't know. But moving on from the tighty-whities, another issue that I think the film has is the fact that by the end of the film, Dolemite is no longer the focus of the narrative. The narrative sort of shifts to, like, Jerry Jones's character, the FBI agent. And maybe that's because Jerry Jones also wrote this film. He just wrote a cool scene for himself at the end. I don't know. But, like, I feel like the FBI agent in this film is a more badass character than Dolemite is. Like, he sort of steals the show from Dolemite by the end. And that really feels awkward story-wise. Like, oh, you know, Dolemite will only kill his rival, he won't kill, like, the politician. The FBI agent will kill the politician. It's like, seriously? Are you serious right now? I don't know. I mean, that being said, the car chase scene in this film is one of the few action scenes that isn't unintentionally funny, which is another issue with this film. Like, it's technically an action comedy, but like a lot of, like, bad B-movies, the actual comedy in the film comes off more as cringe, and the actual serious action beats that are meant to be, like, enjoyed earnestly come off as funny. You know, it's just the space that this film occupies, unfortunately. Like, don't get me wrong, the movie is better than something like Troll 2, for instance, but still something that you can kind of enjoy ironically. You know, like I said, I don't want to be mean about this. I don't want to be mean about this, because I did enjoy Dolemite. I think that this is a sincere effort from everyone involved. They tried to make the best movie that they could, and there's a lot of, like, things in the film that you can genuinely enjoy. But there's also a lot of evidence that this film is, like, a first-time effort from almost everyone. Like, nothing's put together right, the acting is obviously amateurish, and the cinematography is hit or miss, and it's so funny, because there's like this one scene in the movie, and I kept noticing it on every single rewatch I had, where Dolemite is in his car, and the camera's directly in his face, it's a close-up shot, but there's no lighting available in the car, so it looks like he's some sort of demon, just a black-faced demon with like white teeth and like glittery eyes. It's so weird. And I was like, why is it like this? And then it's so funny watching the biopic, Dolemite Is My Name, and D'Urville Martin's character in that movie, played by Wesley Snipes, says, hey, you can't have a white DP on this film. You need a black DP because a black cinematographer would know how to shoot black people, because black people absorb light while white people reflect it. And hearing that line in the biopic, it hit really hard. Like, I thought it was a good joke, because it's like, yeah, because you get shots like that. But in any case, yeah, no, Dolemite's not a good movie, but it is a fun movie. Like I said, I think you can enjoy this film ironically, or at least I can. And I do marvel at a lot of things that the film does. So, for better or worse, if you're interested in Blaxploitation, go and check out Dolemite. Who knows, maybe you'll enjoy it more than I did. And you know what? I'll admit it, watching this film, it did make me curious to see the other 6. So that's something. The story did leave me wanting more. And that's the best you can ask for out of any movie. In any case, that was my review of Dolemite. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please feel free to subscribe if you're feeling generous. You can also follow me on Instagram or Letterboxd if you want to hear more of my film takes. And I will see you later.